I realized I'd crossed a line before I even opened the door. It wasn't fear that stopped me, it was recognition. The knock came at 12:06 a.m., not urgent, not desperate. 3 calm taps. The kind people use when they don't want to look guilty. At that hour, nothing good ever comes looking for you unless it already knows where you live. I stood there with my hand on the lock, listening to the quiet of my own house, thinking how carefully I'd built it to keep surprises out. Then the knock came again, patient, almost polite. I opened the door and immediately wished I hadn't. She stood on my porch under the weak yellow light, her jacket buttoned wrong, her hair still damp from the cold air. No tears. No drama. Just a tired woman holding herself together out of habit. "I'm sorry," she said before I could speak. "I know it's late." Her voice was steady, which somehow made it worse. "Can I sit somewhere for a minute? I don't need anything. I just don't want to be by myself right now." That should have been the moment I protected my peace. Instead, I stepped aside. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and the sound settled into the room like something permanent. "My name is Thomas. I'm 58 years old. I've lived in this house long enough to know every sound it makes at night. I used to be an engineer. My job was to notice problems before they became failures. Since my wife died 6 years ago, I've kept my life small on purpose. Predictable mornings. Quiet evenings. No explanations required. My children are grown and scattered, and they believe I'm fine. Most days, I let them." The woman sitting on my couch was 38. Claire. New neighbor. I knew that much from the mailbox. She sat carefully, as if she didn't want to leave fingerprints on my life. I stayed across from her, hands folded, maintaining a distance that felt respectful and cowardly at the same time. Outside, a porch light flicked on somewhere down the street. I noticed it because she did. Her eyes lifted, her shoulders tightening just enough for me to see it. "Do you want me to call someone?" I asked. "A friend?" She shook her head. "Not tonight." I didn't press. Men my age learn when not to ask follow-up questions. The silence stretched, thick but not awkward. Then my phone buzzed on the table beside me. One message. Unknown number. "Is she there?" I didn't react fast enough. Claire saw my face change. She didn't ask what it said. She already knew. "He won't yell," she said quietly. "That's not his way. He just makes things uncomfortable. He likes witnesses." That word landed heavy. Witnesses. I imagined curtains shifting, the subtle curiosity of neighbors who'd known me for years. Good man. Quiet man. The kind people trust. I looked at the door, then at my phone. I could answer. I could end this before it grew teeth. I didn't. I turned the screen face down and told myself I was choosing calm. A moment later, the street grew aware of itself. Footsteps. Not rushed. Not angry. Someone taking their time. Claire didn't move. That scared me more than panic would have. Then a porch light across the street went dark. Another came on. The neighborhood was awake now, even if no one stepped outside. A knock followed, light, almost friendly. Not on my door. On the neighbor's fence. A voice drifted through the night. "Evening," he said. "Sorry to bother anyone so late." I stayed where I was. That was my mistake. Not opening the door. Not closing it. Doing nothing. Silence felt safer. And that's when I knew I'd chosen myself. The knock came again, this time on my door. Slower. Like a reminder. Claire looked at me, not pleading, not angry, just measuring what kind of man I was going to be. I didn't feel brave. I felt exposed. And the thing that scared me most wasn't him standing outside. It was the certainty that, whatever I did next, the neighborhood would remember. The next morning I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper, written in neat, careful letters. "Thank you for last night. Please don't hate me for dragging you into it." My stomach tightened the same way it had when the lock clicked, because notes like that don't end stories, they start them. I stood in my driveway at 7 a.m., staring at the paper while sprinklers hissed and a delivery van rolled by too slowly. I could already feel the neighborhood deciding what it had seen. I'm Thomas. I'm 58. I used to be an engineer, the kind who measured risk for a living, and after my wife died 6 years ago I started measuring my days the same way, quiet, controlled, nothing that invites questions. If you're watching this, you should hear my story because it isn't about a wild romance. It's about the moment a man my age realizes the real danger isn't getting hurt. It's getting talked about. I didn't see Claire that morning. Her blue house stayed quiet, blinds drawn. I told myself that was good. Quiet meant it hadn't spread. Quiet meant no one had stood on their porch with a mug of coffee and a new opinion about me. Then I walked to the mailbox and saw Mrs. Donnelly 2 doors down, her robe tied tight, her smile too bright. "Morning, Tom," she called. Not Thomas. Tom. Like we were sharing something. I nodded and kept moving, but she added, light as air, everything okay last night? I heard a man's voice. That was my first hook of panic. I could have lied. I could have laughed. Instead I did what I always do when I'm unsure, I went neutral. Just someone lost, I said, and hated how practiced it sounded. Her smile held for half a second too long. Oh, she replied, like she didn't believe me but didn't need to say it. I walked back with my mail and felt, for the first time in years, like my own street wasn't mine. By noon I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Then my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I didn't open it right away. I watched it light up, fade, light up again, and I thought about my kids calling from another state, about how I'd always told them the same thing, stay out of messy situations. The message finally popped onto the screen anyway. You seem like a decent man. Decent men don't hide. A second later, I'd like to thank you in person. 6 p.m. Your driveway. No threats. No anger. Just the kind of confidence that makes you feel smaller. I put the phone down and washed the same clean plate twice, because my hands needed something to do. At 3, Claire finally appeared outside. She was carrying a small bag of groceries, moving like she hoped the air itself wouldn't notice her. When she saw me on my porch, she stopped. For a second she looked like she might turn around and disappear. Then she walked over, slow and steady. I'm sorry, she said again, like the word was a habit she'd learned to survive. Did he come by? Not yet, I answered. I kept my voice calm, but my pulse wasn't listening. He texted. Her face went pale in a controlled way. He does that. He makes appointments with your fear. That line hit me harder than any yelling would have. I glanced toward the street, toward the curtains, toward the tidy lawns that suddenly felt like an audience. Claire, I said, and lowered my voice without meaning to. People heard him. Mrs. Donnelly asked questions. She flinched, not because she cared about gossip, but because she understood consequences. I didn't want this for you, she whispered. Last night I couldn't go back inside and be alone with my thoughts. I saw your porch light. I thought, he's the kind of man who won't make it worse. There was no romance in it. Just a tired kind of trust. I should have told her to stay away from me. I should have protected my reputation like I'd protected my quiet. Instead I heard myself say, what happened with him? She didn't give me a story. She gave me a fact. He doesn't like being told no, she said. So he turns it into a public conversation. A car door slammed somewhere. Both of us looked. Nothing. Just sound. That was the second hook, how easily my body started bracing. I can leave, she said quickly. I can tell him you didn't know. I can, no, I cut in, then softened. Don't do anything that makes him louder. The sentence surprised me. It sounded like experience, like I'd been in her shoes, when I hadn't. But I had been in neighborhoods. I had been in marriages where silence meant peace. I understood volume. At 5:30, I watched the street from behind my curtains like a man I wouldn't have respected a week earlier. I saw kids ride bikes, saw a couple walk a dog, saw Mrs. Donnelly water her flowers as if she wasn't listening for engines. Then, at exactly 6, a clean black sedan parked at the curb. A man stepped out wearing a simple jacket and a calm smile, as if he was arriving to return a borrowed tool. He looked up and waved at the nearest porch like he belonged here. Then he walked toward my driveway. He stopped under my porch light and called, Tom? We should talk. I didn't realize I was ending it until I heard my own voice do it. Claire, you should stop coming over. The words came out calm, almost polite, exactly the kind of sentence a decent man can hide behind. But the second it landed, the room changed. She didn't argue. She just blinked once, as if she'd been expecting this from the start, and that made my chest go tight. I'm Tom. I'm 58. I'm telling you this because men like me don't usually get a dramatic moment where we're clearly wrong. We get quiet choices, sentences that sound responsible and end up being cruel. And we don't notice the damage until the door closes and the house goes back to how it was, only colder. The worst part was hearing my heartbeat in every pause again. After her ex showed up under my porch light like he owned the street, things didn't explode. That's what made it worse. He didn't shout. He smiled, spoke softly, and called me, sir, with just enough respect to make me look paranoid if I reacted. He said Claire was going through a stressful patch. He said he was only checking she was safe. Then he looked past me, toward the dark windows down the block, and added, good community you've got here. People notice things. The next day, Mrs. Donnelly waved like we were sharing a secret. At the hardware store, a guy I'd nodded to for 10 years asked, everything settled down over there? No one accused me of anything. That was the point. They didn't need proof. They needed a story-shaped gap, and my silence filled it. Claire tried to keep life normal. She'd happen to be outside when I took out the trash. She left a loaf of bread on my steps with a sticky note, Too much. Please take some. Once, I found her by the curb with a flat tire and helped, quietly, because that's what I know how to do. For a few minutes, with her standing close but not too close, it felt almost safe. Then a car slowed in front of my house. Not stopping. Just slowing. The driver's face turned, lingering. Claire's shoulders stiffened. Mine did too. In that instant I pictured the headline my life could become without anyone ever writing it: old man and young woman. Neighbor drama. Pathetic. I hated myself for thinking it, but I thought it anyway. Fear doesn't ask permission. That night I called my oldest friend, Ray. He's 70, retired, the kind of man who says what he means because he ran out of time for politeness years ago. I told him about the midnight knock. I told him about the polite shadow who kept showing up. I didn't tell him the part that mattered, that I liked the way my house sounded when Claire was in it. Ray listened, then said, "So what are you doing, Tommy?" "I'm staying out of it," I answered. He snorted. "You're already in it. The question is who you're going to be while you're there." "I'm 58, I said, like it was a verdict. Ray went quiet for a beat. Then he said, "You're not younger, but you're not dead. Stop acting like you get points for choosing loneliness." The next afternoon Claire came by. She stood on my porch, hands in her jacket pockets, eyes tired but steady. "I won't stay long," she said. "I just wanted to check if you're okay." The simple kindness of it made me feel exposed, like she could see the fear under my calm face. I could have said, "Come in." I could have offered coffee. I could have let the day be small. Instead I heard Mrs. Donnelly's voice in my head. I saw that slowed car. I imagined my kids hearing a rumor and calling with that strained, careful tone. So I did the cowardly adult thing. I made it sound reasonable. "Claire," I said gently, "people talk. And they will talk about you, too. You don't need that." Her eyes searched mine. "Is that what you think this is?" "No," I lied, because the truth would have made me look foolish. "I think it's better if we keep it simple. Neighborly." She nodded slowly, like she was storing my words in a place that would hurt later. "Okay," she said, and the way she said it told me she wasn't asking anymore. She was agreeing. She didn't come by the next day. Or the one after. The bread didn't appear. The curtain in her front window stayed still. In the evenings I found myself listening for sounds I'd never wanted before: her steps on the sidewalk, her gate latch, her voice. On the fourth day, I walked past her house and saw her loading a box into her car. Not moving out, just making space. She didn't look up. I kept walking like I hadn't seen. Another quiet choice. That night my living room felt too large. My coffee tasted like nothing. I stared at the empty couch where she'd perched that first night, careful not to leave fingerprints. And I understood the real punishment of being responsible at my age. You can protect your reputation so well that you end up alone with it. I had pushed her away to keep the neighborhood calm. All I'd done was make my house silent again. And for the first time since my wife died, the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like loss. I heard my own name said like a warning before I saw who spoke it. Tom. Not yelled, placed into the air where anyone could pick it up. I was weighing bruised apples when I spotted Claire by the cereal, frozen mid-reach, and the man from my porch beside her, smiling. 3 shoppers slowed, pretending to study labels. "I'm Tom, I'm 58. That matters now. I'm telling you this because you think your life is private until someone decides it isn't. And because when a man my age finally tells the truth out loud, he doesn't get applause. He gets consequences." That morning my daughter called from Phoenix, asking if I was keeping busy. I almost told her everything. Instead I said, "All good," and heard how thin it sounded. After I hung up, I felt smaller. I hadn't spoken to Claire in days. I'd convinced myself that distance was maturity. Then I noticed her porch light stayed off every night, and my house started to feel like a museum, clean and full of things no one touched. When I saw her in that store, my first instinct was to turn my cart around. My second instinct, smaller, stubborn, was to stand still, because running wouldn't erase what people had already decided. Her ex leaned toward her cart, voice warm. "We can talk like adults," he said, loud enough to sound reasonable. "No more hiding at the neighbors. No more drama." He let the word neighbor hang there, sweet as syrup, sharp as a blade. Claire's eyes flicked to me, then away, like she didn't want to stain me with her trouble. That look decided it. I walked over. Not fast. Not brave. Just present. "Claire," I said, keeping my voice level. Then, to him, "Evening." He turned as if he'd expected me all along. "Tom, right?" he said. "Good to see you out. Community matters." He was performing again, making witnesses, collecting them like receipts. A woman near the oranges pretended to study labels. A teenager paused with a basket. My mouth went dry. This was the scene I'd tried to avoid, and here it was anyway, under fluorescent lights, with strangers as judges. Ray's voice came back to me, "You're already in it." Claire swallowed. "I didn't ask you to come," she murmured, almost apologizing to me for existing. That cut deeper than the man's smile. I looked at her and did what I should have done on the first night, said something plain and true. "You don't have to ask," I told her. "Not for this." He chuckled softly. "See? This is what I mean. He thinks he's helping." He angled his body so the aisle could see his open hands. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want my family to be okay." Family. The lie was polished, ready for an audience. Claire's hands tightened on the cart handle. "Don't call it that," she said, quiet but firm. He didn't flinch. "Then call it whatever you like," he replied. "Just stop running to strangers when you're upset." The old me would have stepped back, let her carry it alone, then gone home to my clean silence and my clean reputation. Instead I heard myself say, "She isn't running to strangers." My voice shook once, then steadied. "She's your neighbor. And she's allowed to feel safe." For a second the aisle went still. He stared at me, measuring. Then he smiled wider, as if I'd proven his point. "Safe," he repeated, tasting it. "Tom, you're a decent man. Don't let yourself get tangled in someone else's mess." He lowered his voice just enough to feel intimate. "People talk. You know that." I did know. My heart hammered. And then I made the choice I'd been postponing. I raised my chin and spoke so the aisle could hear. "Let them," I said. "Claire doesn't owe you a conversation. Not here, not anywhere. If you have something practical, put it in writing. Otherwise, you're done." That word, done, landed like a dropped tool. Claire's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just breathed, like the air had finally loosened around her ribs. He held the smile a moment longer, then nodded, polite as ever. "Of course," he said. "I'd never want to make a scene." He glanced at the watchers, lifted 2 fingers in a friendly salute, and walked away with slow, careful steps. No threats. No shouting. Just the promise he could return anytime and still look like the reasonable one. At the checkout, Claire stood beside me, our cart separated by a respectful inch. "I'm sorry," she began. I shook my head. "Don't," I said. "I'm the one who hid." Outside, the late afternoon light made everything look softer than it was. Cars passed. Lives continued. Claire stared at the asphalt like it might give her instructions. "Why did you do that?" she asked. The honest answer was complicated. So I gave her the simplest piece of it. "Because I'm tired of being afraid," I said. "And because I don't want you to be alone in a room full of people." She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't ask. We just walked to our cars like 2 adults carrying something fragile between us. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood silence didn't feel like a verdict. It felt like space. I woke up to the sound of someone testing my front gate, not opening it, just touching it like a question. The street was still gray, the kind of dawn that makes you doubt what you saw yesterday. I looked through the blinds and saw him by my mailbox with an envelope in his hand, as if he belonged to my morning. He didn't look angry. That was the problem. He looked calm enough to be believed. If you're still listening, it's because you know how a quiet threat can follow you longer than a loud one. I'm Tom. I'm 58. I used to be an engineer, trained to notice small shifts before something failed. After my wife died 6 years ago, I started living like a man maintaining a structure, keep it clean, keep it silent, never add weight you can't carry. Then a 38-year-old neighbor knocked at midnight and reminded me that a life can be perfectly stable and still be empty. The envelope stayed after he left, wedged under the little red flag. No stamp. No return address. Just my name, written neatly. Inside was a single sheet, "For your records." Then a list, dates, times, places. The midnight knock. The supermarket. Unwanted interference. At the bottom, "If you continue, I will pursue legal options." It was written like a receipt, not a threat. That made my hands shake, because receipts are meant for witnesses. For 10 minutes I stood in my kitchen staring at it, hearing Ray's voice in my head, "You're already in it." My first impulse was cowardice dressed as wisdom, fold it up, stay quiet, let her handle her own storm. My second impulse was worse, I imagined my kids hearing a rumor and thinking their father had become pathetic. I hated myself for how fast that fear showed up. I walked 2 doors down anyway and rang Claire's bell. My heart pounded like I was the one doing something wrong. When she opened, her face was tired but steady. I held up the letter. "He's trying to turn you into paperwork," I said. Her eyes moved over the page, then back to me. "He thinks if it's official, people will stop questioning him," she whispered. "He did it to me for years. He'd threaten court just to make me feel small." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd spent years convincing myself that silence was safety. Claire didn't ask me to fix her life. She asked me one question, simple enough to hurt. Are you stepping back because you want to, she said, or because you're afraid of what they'll say? I could have lied. Instead I swallowed and admitted it. I'm afraid, I said. Not of him. Of the street. Of being the story. She nodded once. Then don't let them write it, she said. Write it yourself. So I did something I hadn't done since my wife's funeral. I made a phone call I didn't want to make. I called my son. My hand hovered over the contact like it weighed a pound. When he answered, cheerful and busy, I almost backed out. Then I heard my own voice break. I might need you to hear something without judging me, I said. There was a pause, then his tone softened. Okay, Dad. I'm here. I didn't give details. I just told him I wasn't dating, I wasn't chasing anything, I was trying not to hide. You don't have to do that anymore, he said. He didn't ask for the story. He just made room for me to be human. At dusk Claire came over with 2 mugs of coffee, one in each hand. No grand gesture, just a small offering, like she was saying, we live here. We can choose how. We sat on the porch steps, shoulder to shoulder but not touching, listening to sprinklers click and a distant dog bark. Mrs. Donnelly's curtain shifted. I saw it. Claire saw it too. She tensed. I didn't. I stood and faced the street, not like a fighter, like a man who's done shrinking. When Mrs. Donnelly finally stepped out, pretending to check her flowers, I said, "Evening." My voice stayed level. She smiled cautiously. "Everything all right, Tom?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes. And if you hear anything, you'll hear it from me, not from rumors." Her smile faltered, then turned into something closer to respect. She murmured, "Of course," and went back inside. The world didn't end. The street stayed standing. Later, Claire and I washed the mugs in my sink. She watched the water run like it was teaching her something. "So what happens now?" she asked. I thought about promises, about age, about how easy it is to say forever when you're not the one who has to live it. Then I said the only honest thing. "Now we try," I told her. Not loudly. Not to prove anything. Just, here. Tomorrow morning. Next week. As long as it's good. She breathed out, slow, and her eyes shone with relief that didn't need words. The next morning my porch light clicked off at sunrise, and it didn't feel like retreat. It felt like a beginning. I'm 58, and I won't pretend love arrives on schedule. Sometimes it shows up at midnight, asks to sit for a minute, and dares you to stop hiding. If you say yes, it doesn't fix your life. It simply gives it back. 6 weeks later, the street went back to pretending it had never noticed us. That's how neighborhoods forgive, by forgetting on purpose. The sedan never came again. The envelope stayed in a drawer, its edges softening like a threat that had lost interest. I thought that would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like responsibility. I'm Tom. I'm still 58. I still wake up earlier than I should. I still drink my coffee too hot and read the paper at the table where my wife once folded napkins with military precision. What changed wasn't the schedule. It was the noise inside the quiet. Claire didn't move in. She didn't move out. She stayed. Some mornings she walks past my house with her hood up, phone tucked under her arm, nodding at me the way adults do when they're choosing not to perform. Other mornings, she sits on my porch steps with a mug and waits for the light to change. We don't announce ourselves. We don't give anyone a title to chew on. Once, at the hardware store, a man I barely know said, "You look lighter." I didn't correct him. I didn't explain. I paid for screws I didn't need and carried them home like proof of something small and useful. The hardest part surprised me. It wasn't the looks. It wasn't the whispers I imagined after dark. It was learning that courage doesn't feel like confidence. It feels like hesitation you choose to live with. Every time I reach for the door when Claire knocks, during the day, always during the day, I still feel that pause. The old rule trying to save me. I open it anyway. My kids came to visit last weekend. We grilled in the yard. Claire waved from her steps and kept walking. Later my son asked, "Careful, is she a friend?" I nodded. He smiled like he'd been waiting for that answer to be enough. We didn't say more. We didn't need to. One evening, as the sun dropped and the sprinklers ticked on, Claire said, "What if this gets harder?" I told her the truth I've learned too late to dress up. Then we'll know we didn't choose easy. She laughed, not relief, not joy, recognition. The kind that lasts. Sometimes, alone in the house, I still feel the old silence testing me, seeing if I'll retreat. I don't fight it. I let it sit. Then I do one ordinary thing, wash a mug, water a plant, leave the porch light on for a minute longer than necessary. Small signals. To myself. I won't pretend this is a story about second chances wrapped in certainty. It isn't. It's about staying present when you could disappear politely. About not asking your age to decide your honesty. About choosing to be seen without asking for applause. If you're listening and you're like me, measured, careful, practiced at staying out of the way, here's what I know now: love doesn't arrive to fix you. It arrives to stand beside you while you keep fixing the wrong things. And sometimes that's enough to finally come home.